Hello, Mr. John Carpay. My name is Tarra, shipman. Um, I would like to talk to you about something that is of great importance to me and to the disability community. These are things that I've noticed over the years, and especially within the last year since Kenny has gotten into power. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of a history lesson because I survived the Klein era. I survived Redford, and I survived a few others. The most damning so far that I've seen is Kenny. Not to say that Klein wasn't next in line with his cuts to disability and changes to programs, because what I needed when I first came to Alberta was one of the best provinces to live in if you had a disability, because a lot of the programs were, person-centered, which meant that if you had any kind of diagnosis, they would help you where you needed it the most. For me, when I was single, that meant that even though I was able to be independent, there were certain aspects to my neurological abilities that would never develop and will never develop. Uh, so that means that I had help in the areas that I would normally have issues in. These days, they ask family members or husbands to do it. And in my books, that's wrong. Also, back in the mid to late 90s, Klein also went after PDD funding, persons with developmental disabilities, which made it so that I could access programs that suited my needs. Now, those that were grandfathered had their programs changed so that programs that were person-centered also settled on a one-size-fits-all kind of thing, where it mainly curtailed to those with seen or more severe disabilities, but yet people like me who don't need a community buddy, so to say, or a companion is what they call it, I think, and but more of a coach, someone who knows about neurodiversity issues and or behavioral issues for which healthcare aides do not. Healthcare aides are made for seniors that live in nursing homes. They're there to wipe your butt or change you. They don't know how to teach you the fundamentals of body language because they weren't taught that. What they're taught is helping people how to exercise, like range of motion. That's basically where you pick up the person's leg, bend it around for them so that they can keep the mobility in their leg to the point where they have some muscle tone, even though the leg will never work. The other part of it is that when it comes to community aides have to be specially trained for disabilities, because many of them overlap another form of disability. It's better known as comorbidity. Many with autism have things like schizophrenia or whatever, and that's not being addressed. And then they also go towards more of a group kind of classroom of let's watch a movie of what could be and then act it out. Well, some of us live in the real world. I'm married, and I'm going to put things to you in a way that if you were in my shoes, you'd be really concerned too. So, as for the history lesson, you already know it. Klein pretty much destroyed PDD, as well as a lot of the programs. Either they went bankrupt or they changed their program so that it suited more the severe or more seen issues, which I don't fit. And in 2006, I believe it was, PDD, because of all the cuts and what have you and the changes of Klein days, they came out with a test, better known as an IQ test, where if people were not below a certain mark, which was 70 IQ, if they weren't below 70 IQ, they were denied all services. So that meant that not only did programs change so that people didn't get the right help or the right resources in order to work, because let's face it, the UCP want us to work. Well, some of us can't because of serious illness or disabilities, for which is a full-time job. For me, yes, I can deal with my disability, but I can also deal with a job. I worked 10 years because of social programs just like the one I came from. Without those programs, I wouldn't be the woman that you see. I wouldn't know who to turn to stand up for myself. I would still be living at home with mommy and daddy. I wouldn't be driving. I wouldn't be married. Let's just put it that way. Now, moving forward, several years, I moved to Edmonton thinking, oh, bigger city, better resources. No, what I found was a city full of empty promises. Everything was for the more seen or more apparent disabilities for which I don't fit. I found people with autism, even though their IQ was through the roof, but their mental or diagnosed stated that their mental age was more that of a child. How do you compute IQ with cognitive deficits for which indicate behavioral and or knowing how to read body language? Not all of us can do facial recognition. I can't. I can't read body language whatsoever. Fact is, that's the way it is for most autistics. That's why we have trouble with socialization. Because for us, if we can't read you, we don't follow you. We are a blunt kind of people. So our way may seem rude to you, when for us, that's our normal. To force things like tact, diplomacy, and soft skills down the throat of a brain who's already mature is like beating a dead horse. If you keep on beating the dead horse, you might bruise it and tenderize the meat, but essentially it's not going to come back. Well, my brain is this way for the rest of my life. I did not have a choice with the cards that were dealt with me. I did not have a choice when the government changed PDD. I did not have a choice when programs went to one size fits all. And my friends didn't have a choice either when they were denied services. Now, our government has basically de-indexed age, and I know this for a fact because most of my friends were earning about $1,700. And they went down to $1,400. That extra $300 allowed them to get by in a month. When rent is slum zone, you're looking at about $950 for a 2-bedroom. On the other end of the scale, you're looking at $1,500 to $1,700 for the same kind of 2-bedroom. I manage a place where a 2-bedroom is $1,000. And that's on the cheap end. Now, that said, I'm one of the lucky few who actually have a partner who supports her. But I hate to say this, family doesn't last forever. And friends, the ones that you do have, you don't want them to do what you need them to do. Because a lot of the times, friends disappear when they figure out that your disability is not what they signed up for. The things that people like me need should fall upon the laps of properly trained staff, not HCAs, not agencies for which only serve more severe end of disability or seniors. I want to keep my independence, and for me, that means helping me in the areas that I can't or will never develop. It doesn't stop me from learning. It just means that I'm learning in a different way and at a different level. For me, it means everything to keep my autonomy, to keep my independence. But how do I do that when there's no resources for me? How do my friends do that on $1,200 to $1,400 a month? People tell them, save your money. Well, how do you do that when rent is well over 30% of a person's income? Isn't that the law? It hasn't been 30% since 1980s, actually 1990s. When I look at BC rents and in even some of the larger towns, for something that's half decent, you can still rent for $950 for a 2-bedroom. And it's like going to middle ground here, which would be more like the 1200 zone. Yeah, taxes in BC are a lot more expensive. You know what? I would rather pay a huge tax to know that I have universal free health and know that my medications are covered. To know that I can actually go to my doctor and spend half an hour with him because I have comorbid issues. I also have asthma and social anxiety disorder. I'm also 45, which means I'm at the age where things start to change for women. Whether it be breast cancer down to whatever other faults that might be genetic. I'm also overweight. So is my husband. We literally take on middle-aged spread like nobody's business together. But aside from that, I also have needs, disability needs. Here in Alberta, for the last 10 years, I've been called a liability by employers. Yeah, that's right. They don't hire people with disabilities because people like me need accommodations in case if they're in a noisy area, they might need a break and go for a walk. But yet they might be called lazy by other employees who don't understand neurodiverse issues. This is a going gambit for a lot of people with disabilities, whether they're physical or of other nature. Now, those that are on age, they put in a criteria similar to what PDD has. It's an IQ test that goes after what a person can do or can't do. Well, some people have such severe illness, both mentally or physically, that work is not an option. Think about it, buddy. If you have multiple sclerosis, they have good and bad days. But unfortunately, the bad days that come, they can't work. I was raised with multiple sclerosis. I should know this. I have 2 family members with it. From the time I was 15 till I was 23, I was working and helping people just like my family members. I worked in nursing homes before you needed a piece of paper. That's when my nightmare began of unemployment. You want me to work? Set in the right resources. I have ideas. When will the government talk to me? Now, I was told by the NDP, freehand, as a matter of fact, told me to contact you. Even though that I know that you are UCP and you'll defend Kenny from here to kingdom come. The fact is, I also saw your YouTube saying that what Kenny is doing is a power-hungry thing. Bill 10 scares the hell out of me. It scares the hell out of my community. When COVID has taken all that I felt safe in, but my home, and now he brings in Bill 10 that basically states that in some of the areas concerning COVID and emergency, that he can go into your home without notice, without provocation, do whatever he wants without your permission. I got news for you. My home is my last refuge. I will feel violated if somebody willy-nilly came into my home and poured chemicals in my home for which I might be allergic to. Because I just told you that I have asthma. Anything that is ammonia or bleach base will kill my cats and set off an asthma attack that I can't control. It's bad enough that I'm scared of going out into a store, and because it's spring, I'm allergic to mold. Guess what's going to happen? I will cough, I will wheeze, I will hack. And it'll sound like a common cold, or it might sound like COVID. I don't know. But I'm scared that somebody who sees it will report me. I get charged. And it's only so much as asthma. But yet I have to quarantine. I have to be afraid. These are my human liberties, my human rights that have been so diminished. Must my home be violated? My last safety refuge. I don't get AISH, but I do get CPPD. I know what it's like to be on AISH. I know what these people have to go through. And people here in Edmonton, my friends, they're all screaming for food because they can't afford it. Some of them have been threatened to be kicked out of their home during COVID because their landlords are greedy, even though it's against the law. Some of these people are parents. Some of these people have chronic issues like fibromyalgia or MS on top of their disability. Some of them are like me, who have autism and have chronic issues. He should have never, ever gone after AISH. He should have never, ever gone after people's pensions. And most of all, this Bill 10, no government should have that kind of power. Because it puts people like me and my friends at a huge disadvantage. But Kenny doesn't see that. Because all he cares about is his rich buddies. I've talked to a few UCP about my issues, and I got kind of belittled. They basically told me, why should I care about invisible disabilities when I've got friends that have no legs that can hardly get care for themselves? Well, I hate to say this. People with more physical nature of disability get better care than anyone with invisible disabilities. There is no accommodation in jobs. No community resource understands invisible disabilities like mine. And no person understands it either. That's right, I said it. Because I have to live it. I've gotten funny, you don't look disabled. Funny, you don't look autistic. And that's because they're relying on things like the show, like called The Good Doctor or Mike Lake's Son, because that's all people ever see. But yet there's people like me whose disability does not show, unless if you get to know them. Now, no government, as far as I'm concerned, is above the law. As a matter of fact, what Kenny has done for the past year by going after PDD, yes, I said it. Last year, Kenny went after PDD just after he was elected in. That means that it was changed yet again. Now people have to go through more hoops and what have you just to get what they need for their adult children. They still have to do the PDD testing for the IQ test. But that said, there's a lot of people in the waiting end of things, still waiting for an answer. And now that COVID's hit, they probably won't ever get that answer. So, again, the disability community has paid, once again, a government hand due to cuts to resources. Many who are on the waiting list for AISH, because of the criteria that has just been changed, that if you don't match the criteria, you don't get AISH. So what do you do then when you don't qualify for AISH? Hell, those that are on AISH, if they don't meet the criteria on a yearly basis, they might get their funds denied. That is the truth. As a matter of fact, a lot of people are scared of that. I don't know how to stress this any further. Furthermore, when it comes to resources, no employment agency helps. How I know? Been there, done that for the last 10 years. I've tried. How often must a person go to these so-called resources and get turned away because they don't have the knowledge or the ability to understand you or want to try? How many times do you go for an interview and they say eye contact is a necessary thing when some autistics don't know how to do that or don't have the ability? But yet it's pushed upon us because it's a must. It's society norm. But for some of us, it's a damning experience. And I can look at people in the eye quite easily. I'm looking at you through this camera. But at the same time, I also look away, as you've probably noticed. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into an interview and was scared shitless. I can't tell you how many times I've talked up in front of people and all I could think of, where's the nearest exit? Even walking into a mall's like that. I also have sensory issues, which is also a part of autism. For me, that's noise and visual and audio issues. So for me, being in a noisy, busy environment would give me a little thing called a meltdown. That's where your brain literally stops working because it can't process the information going in. And like any computer, because that's what your brain is, it will go on tilt. And it causes you to become not able to think on a logical base. You can't do anything. You can't make sense of anything. It's just a jumble, and it's every negative feeling possible that you could possibly imagine all balled up into one big black ball inside of you, and all you want to do is scream and run and hide. Yeah. It's very debilitating. Been there, done that several times. As I got older, no, it hasn't gotten better. There are my days. To furthermore, when it comes to people's rights, I feel like I've been attacked, much like my community, those that have differing disabilities and are either aging or coming into adulthood. I feel that the disability community has been attacked over and over and over. The only time that the community has actually had a break is when Notley was in power. Hate to say it, but Rachel Notley did not cause all of these issues. When it comes to deficit, you have to spend money in order to make money. Kind of like you have to make a mess in order to have a clean home sometimes, especially if you're doing any kind of spring cleaning. Furthermore, if you were ever to look up Klein and deficit, you will notice before Rachel Notley, anyone before Klein and after Klein that was ever CP related or UCP, hate to say it, it was them that caused all the deficits. It was them that caused all the changes and made my community and their people's lives in my community hell. When you go from systems that work for people like me to nothing, you have to wonder where the morality is. When you go after systems that work, such as health, yeah, the waits were longer, but you know what? The bigger the town, the longer the wait for anything. And the bigger the lineup. So really, half a dozen one, half a dozen the other. Either that or build more hospitals or clinics. When you have universal systems that help people, that's where my issues are taken care of. That's where everyone's issues are taken care of. It works. I'll be the first one to say it. But to ask people that have the need to be on certain services or resources because they can't get a job, because of the bigotry, because of the issues surrounding disability and the stigmas. That's wrong. You should be adding to the community. You want me to work? You add to my community resources for which fundamentally will help me become a part of your world and workforce for which is made for average people. You can't ask a 16-year-old to be like you at your age without it having some kind of guidance or support put in place. Same thing goes for me. When you give me the resources that I need to exist in your world, I succeed. You don't want me on any kind of assistance or what have you? Then give me what I need. What I need died a long time ago with Klein. For me to fundamentally live and work in your world, that service needs to be person-centered. Based around the person's diagnosis, not around some stupid IQ. Because I hate to say this, but many autistics are very smart people when it comes to an intellect. A lot of my friends have 140 and 170 IQs, but yet they are like me. When it comes to cognitive deficit, look up cognitive and neurological delays. It will tell you that it deals with judgment, communication, face blindness, kind of where you can't read the nuances of people when it comes to certain facial expressions. We can understand the basics, smiling, angry, but it's the quick ones. Like when a person quickly raises an eye like they're thinking or curious, right? Well, I can't read that. Much like some of your body movements look average to the average person, they can read it. But for me, I had to learn my body movements and emulate because I had to emulate society. That's right. Women and most autistics are told that the way they are is wrong. So we try and emulate what other people do so that we can blend in. Better known as masking. Now, I want to put this to you. 10.7, where it gives all authority to government to say or do or push in whatever law they feel like, is wrong. No government should have that kind of power. It's bad enough that the resources we need are pretty much dead in the water, especially now during COVID. But must our lives be that much harder to deal with during this time? We should be a community, not taking things that people need in order to live. Not destroying lives. And most of all, the people that are going to suffer the most are people with disabilities and seniors. Because once COVID is done and jobs get back on the market, anyone with your abilities can get a job tomorrow. I can't. I've tried. Trust me. 10 years of being called a liability is more than enough. You can't ask someone with severe issues to go to work, especially when their brain fundamentally cannot conceive or conceptualize reality. The person might look like me, but fundamentally, up here, are they capable? Not all of us have that ability. And if you have schizophrenia, you should never ask them to work. Because their issues are worse than mine, especially if they're not medicated. Their job is their disability, much like anyone with chronic illness, fibromyalgia, MS, that too is a full-time job. And they should be left out of that stigma. I'm telling you this as a person who's experienced chronic illness within her family. I'm telling you this as a person with a disability, an invisible one. I'm telling you this as a person who's dealt with disabilities her whole entire life. I may not be educated. I may not be as up on things as some, but I know what I'm talking about. And what our government has been doing for the last year is wrong. The government should be working for the people and with the people. He should be there advocating for the people, both in federal and provincial. He should be putting in things that protect the vulnerable people, such as your seniors. Because I know of a lot of seniors right now that live off of less than $1,200 a month. I know of people with disabilities that live off of less than $1,400 a month right now, and they're screaming for food, and the food banks are telling them to go away. The churches, they'll tell you to go away because you're not a member. How I know is that I'm Mormon, and I tried to get help for a friend. And they told me unless they are a member, they get nothing. So during COVID, these people are going to starve. So how many suicides, how many deaths are you willing to ignore before you see the full picture? People are already starting to kill themselves with disabilities within our communities because they can't get help, because they can't financially function during this time, because they can't afford food, they can't afford rent, they can't afford anything. And some of them have kids. Are those kids going to eat? I don't think so. Not with the money that they have. Some of us actually worked to supplement whatever that they needed, because these days Asia isn't enough, especially when the average rent for a slum is $9.50. And if you live and get a subsidy, the subsidies were cut to low-income housing, which meant that if these places needed any kind of repair, it doesn't get done because there isn't enough to go around. That also means that my friends live in squalor, which means that if it needs fixing, it's not going to happen. These places have bed bug issues, mouse issues, cockroach issues. And then to top it all off, people like me, not all of us, do drugs or whatever, and pot is legal. And so I'm going to say this right now. I have friends that use pot to help with their anxiety issues because it's so bad that without it, they can't function. Others use it for chronic pain because it is known to help cancer and MS patients with chronic pain and or anxiety issues. Kenny has no right to call renters criminals or potheads, when for some of us with disabilities, that is the only medicine that helps. I was very insulted the day he went on the news and basically stated that all renters are nothing but potheads and criminals. I have never broken the law. I've never been to jail, but yet I have a disability. I showed that to my community on Facebook. You should have seen the comments. There must have been about 100 of them within 10 minutes. If I was insulted, so were those hundreds. I'm not going to tell you the two groups that I either help manage or own. But what I am going to tell you is that these two groups think that Kenny is nothing more than a tyrant, a power-hungry tyrant. Who only cares about himself and his rich little buddies. Well, it's time to slap Kenny down. And it seems to me that you're the only UCP member that sees the reality. And I hope that when you see this, even though it's 30 minutes long, that you take it seriously. Because these cuts are hurting people. The stories I've seen online, the stories I've seen from my friends across Alberta, hearing my mom's own story when it comes to her medical, hearing my friend who's in her 70s, who's very low income senior, to people who live in squalor even though they're in low income housing. It's bewildering how the government chooses to ignore that. Yes, we're vulnerable. We're vulnerable because the government makes it that way, whatever. But I would like to have a one-on-one with you. And I appreciate that you're standing up against Kenny. Kenny and most UCP, we're a drain on resource, both seniors and people with disabilities. I'm not a drain, because I don't get age, but I need my CPPD. But if my husband gets sick, where will I go? How will I live? As much as I might get his pension, I wouldn't survive without help. And that's what I'm scared of. Both of us have asthma. What are the chances that one of us gets severely sick with COVID and one of us is left to fend for ourselves, especially me? I don't want to be alone. And if my family, who are mostly retired, go through COVID, I want to see my grandma die from COVID. I don't want to see my mom die from COVID. And I don't want to see any of my friends die from COVID. I don't want to see anyone that I care about, that I call friends, family, or my husband. I don't want COVID to get us. And I sure as hell don't want to be alone. I want to grow old with my husband. But how do I if systems and what have you are forever being cut or threatened to be cut by a government who doesn't care? Thanks. Have a nice day.